The morning began like any other, or so it seemed. I woke up to sunlight spilling through the blinds, warm against my face. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, a dull, incessant vibration that felt more irritating than usual. Groggy, I reached for it and squinted at the screen. 10:47 a.m., January 1st, New Year's Day. The hangover weighed heavily on me, a testament to last night's festivities. I vaguely remembered the laughter, the countdown, and the midnight toast at Gabriel's apartment. A blurry montage of voices and music played in my mind as I sat up, the world tilting slightly as my body struggled to catch up with reality. I thumbed through my notifications. My group chat, usually buzzing with jokes and memes, was eerily quiet. I frowned, scrolling back. The last message from Gabriel was strange, just a single sentence posted at 11:59 p.m. the night before. "It's happening." I stared at the words, feeling an inexplicable twinge of unease. What's happening? Before I could dwell on it, I called Gabriel. The line rang once, twice, and then he picked up. "Hey man," he said, his voice light, as if nothing was amiss. "Gabriel, what the hell was that message? Are you okay?" "What message?" His tone was laced with confusion. "Last night, you said, it's happening." I paused. "What did you mean?" A silence stretched between us, growing heavier by the second. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said finally, his voice strangely distant. "We haven't talked in months." I froze, the phone slipping slightly in my grip. "What are you talking about? We were together last night for New Year's." "No, we weren't," he replied, his tone edging toward irritation. "We haven't celebrated New Year's together in years." The call ended abruptly, leaving me sitting there with the phone pressed to my ear, the sound of static echoing in my mind. I called others, friends, family, but each conversation led to the same disorienting outcome. None of them remembered anything about the past year. Worse, they insisted it was January 1st of the previous year. I staggered to the window, pulling the curtains aside. The street below was quiet, unnervingly so. No remnants of celebration, no confetti, no streamers, no hungover stragglers stumbling home. Just an empty street, and a creeping silence that seemed to stretch endlessly. Something was terribly wrong. I turned to my apartment, suddenly aware of its every creak and shadow. It felt unfamiliar, like stepping into someone else's home. On the counter, my keys sat next to a pile of mail I didn't remember receiving. A letter caught my eye, its envelope aged and yellowed as if it had been there for months. Inside was a single piece of paper, the handwriting jagged and frantic. "Don't trust the gaps." I dropped it like it had burned me. My pulse raced, a sickly rhythm that thrummed in my ears as I stumbled back into my bedroom. Pulling open the nightstand drawer, I found my journal, something I hadn't written in for years, yet here it was, filled to the brim with entries I didn't recognize. The entries were detailed, recounting mundane tasks, work meetings, grocery lists, casual outings. But as I flipped through, a pattern emerged. The handwriting grew shakier, the content more fragmented. By the end, the words became a chaotic scrawl, almost unreadable. "It's watching. The year is wrong. They'll make you forget again." A sudden coldness swept through the room. I flipped the journal shut, its weight heavy in my trembling hands. Something moved outside the window, a fleeting shadow in the thick fog that had rolled in unnoticed. My breath hitched. I approached the window cautiously, peering out into the mist-shrouded street below. At first there was nothing. Then, in the haze, I saw a figure. It stood perfectly still, its shape distorted by the shifting fog. It didn't move, didn't waver, just stood there, staring. Or at least I thought it was staring. I yanked the curtains closed and backed away, heart hammering. The figure's presence lingered in my mind, a heavy, oppressive feeling that followed me through the apartment. Every shadow seemed darker, every sound sharper. The air felt heavier, almost suffocating. The figure had stirred something, a memory buried deep, fragmented but insistent. The year is wrong. I turned back to the journal, flipping to the last entry. The words, written in my own hand, burned themselves into my mind. The bookstore. You must go. Tonight. The words felt like an echo, familiar and alien all at once. My hand tightened on the journal as I whispered the name aloud. The Velvet Quill. The memory hit like a flash of lightning. The Velvet Quill, an old decrepit bookstore I hadn't thought of in years, was etched into my memory like a scar. The address came unbidden to my mind, the path there as familiar as my own reflection. I didn't understand why I had to go, but I knew I didn't have a choice. The unease that had taken root in my chest whispered that the answers I sought were waiting there, though I wasn't sure if they would offer relief or only more terror. The fog outside thickened as I grabbed my coat. Whatever was happening, it was far from over, and something told me that the real nightmare had only just begun. The Velvet Quill stood at the end of a narrow alley, its facade cloaked in shadow. The faded sign above the door swayed gently in a non-existent breeze, the gold lettering barely visible beneath years of grime. I hesitated on the threshold, the chill in the air seeping into my bones. A faint light flickered through the cracks of the warped wooden door, beckoning me forward. Pushing it open, I stepped into a dim, musty room filled with towering bookshelves that seemed to bend under the weight of their ancient contents. The air smelled of mildew and something sharp, like rusted metal. The shop was empty, or so I thought. "You came," rasped a voice from the shadows. I froze. At the far end of the room, behind a counter cluttered with crumbling tomes and brass trinkets, stood the shopkeeper. His form was hunched, his bony frame draped in a tattered coat. His face was obscured by the brim of a wide, misshapen hat, but his eyes gleamed with an unnatural light that made my stomach twist. "You remember the year?" he continued, his voice a low rasp that seemed to scrape against the walls. "A mistake, but not uncommon." "What do you mean?" My voice cracked, the words barely audible. He tilted his head, the motion unnervingly slow. "The year keeper. It takes a year every century, erased from memory, erased from time. A tribute to something older than this world." I felt the floor sway beneath me, my breath catching in my throat. "Why do I remember it? Why me?" "You slipped through the cracks," he said, his bony fingers splaying over an ancient leather-bound book on the counter. "The keeper's work is precise, but not perfect. You are a flaw." The word struck like a blow. A flaw, a mistake. The thought felt alien, yet somehow it fit, like an ill-made puzzle piece snapping into place. "What does that mean? Can I fix it?" The shopkeeper let out a low, mirthless chuckle. "Fix it? Number you are untethered, floating in the echoes of a stolen year. To fix it would mean returning to the keeper, and it does not take kindly to being challenged." I staggered back, my heart pounding in my chest. "There has to be a way." "Beware what you ask," he interrupted, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "If you face the keeper, it will demand a price. The choice is yours, but the consequences will follow you beyond time itself." The room seemed to close in around me, the shelves towering like sentinels, their shadows stretching impossibly long. My hands trembled as I reached out, steadying myself against the counter. The shopkeeper slid the leather-bound book toward me, his fingers brushing mine. His touch was icy, and I recoiled instinctively. "This will guide you," he said. "A ritual to summon the keeper. But remember, some things are best left forgotten." His words hung heavy in the air as I clutched the book to my chest. My voice was barely a whisper as I asked, "And if I don't?" The shopkeeper's eyes glinted with something unreadable, pity, perhaps, or warning. "Then the echoes will claim you. The shadows of the lost year will grow louder until they drown you." I fled the shop, the book clutched tightly in my arms. Outside, the fog had thickened, swirling around me in ghostly tendrils. I glanced back once, but the velvet quill had vanished, leaving only an empty alley behind. The apartment was suffocatingly silent when I returned, the weight of the book pressing down on me like an anchor. Its pages were yellowed and brittle, the words scrawled in a language I didn't recognize. But as I flipped through, the symbols seemed to shift and rearrange, forming sentences I could read. To summon the keeper, one must confront the void, speak its name at the threshold of the forgotten year. The instructions were cryptic, laced with warnings of sacrifice and the price of clarity. My hands shook as I traced the symbols, the fear clawing at my resolve. But the thought of the whispers, the shadows that had begun to follow me, was more terrifying than any ritual. At midnight I began. The ritual required objects tied to the forgotten year. I gathered the journal, the letter, and a photograph I'd found tucked in my wallet. One of Gabriel and me at a bar I couldn't remember visiting. With each item placed in a circle of salt, the air grew heavier, the shadows darker. I lit a single candle and whispered the name from the book. Yahok. The flame flickered violently, casting jagged shadows that danced across the walls. The room felt colder, the air electric with unseen energy. A deep, resonant hum filled the space, vibrating through my chest. The shadows coalesced, forming a shape that loomed at the center of the circle. It was humanoid but wrong, its limbs too long, its face shrouded in darkness. Its presence filled the room with an oppressive weight, a suffocating stillness that made my knees buckle. When it spoke, its voice was a low, guttural rumble that echoed within my skull. "You seek the stolen year," it said. I nodded, my throat too dry to speak. The keeper leaned closer, its form rippling like liquid shadow. "It can be returned, but at a cost." "What cost?" I whispered, my voice trembling. The keeper's eyes, or what I thought were eyes, burned with a cold, unholy light. "Your memory anchors you to the year. To reclaim it, you must surrender something equal, a piece of your soul." My breath hitched. The room spun as the enormity of its words crashed over me. The thought of forgetting again was unbearable, but the alternative... "Choose," it demanded, its voice a crescendo of power that shook the very walls. As I hesitated, the shadows writhed, pressing closer. Time itself seemed to hang in the balance, my choice the fulcrum on which everything rested. The keeper loomed over me, its presence warping the air, twisting reality into something foreign and wrong. Shadows coiled around its form, shifting and stretching as if alive. The room seemed to shrink, the walls pressing closer with every passing second. My pulse pounded in my ears, drowning out the hum of the candle's flame and the whispering tendrils of darkness. "Surrender," it rumbled, its voice vibrating through my bones. "Or be consumed." Terror gripped me, rooting me to the floor as its words echoed in my mind. The journal, the letter, and the photograph began to smolder where they lay in the salt circle, thin tendrils of smoke curling upward and disappearing into the void of the keeper's form. My breaths came in shallow gasps, and I fought to keep my thoughts clear as panic threatened to overtake me. "You don't have to do this," I whispered, though the words felt feeble against the weight of its presence. The keeper's form shifted closer, its faceless head tilting unnervingly. "I am not the one who decides. The year was taken by your kind, bound by ancient pacts long forgotten. I only keep what is owed." My throat tightened. "But why me? Why was I spared?" The keeper paused, its shadows swirling faster, the air crackling with tension. "You were not spared. You slipped. A mistake." Its voice grew colder, harsher. "An error must be corrected. You linger where you do not belong." The words struck like a blade, carving through my fragile resolve. My mind raced, searching for some way to fight back, to resist the pull of the keeper's will. The book's instructions had warned of a price, but they had also hinted at a loophole, one I hadn't fully understood. I glanced at the flickering candle, its light weak and flickering against the oppressive darkness. If I surrender my memories, will the year return? Will everyone else remember? The keeper's form stilled, its voice a low, resonant growl. The balance will be restored, but you will cease to exist. The words felt like a blow, and my vision blurred with unshed tears. To surrender everything I had left, every moment, every fragment of identity. It was unthinkable. But the weight of the past year, the fragments of terror and longing that lingered in the back of my mind, pressed heavily on me. "I'll do it," I said, my voice breaking. The keeper surged forward, its shadows engulfing the salt circle, snuffing out the candle's feeble glow. The room plunged into darkness, the only light emanating from the keeper itself, a cold, spectral radiance that illuminated nothing but its own twisted form. "Place your hand upon the void," it commanded. Trembling, I stepped into the circle, the salt crunching beneath my feet. The journal and photograph had disintegrated into ash, the remnants swirling like black snow. The keeper extended a limb, if it could be called that, its edges shifting like smoke. My hand hovered over the void, the chill emanating from it biting into my skin. Before I could hesitate, I pressed my palm against the shadow. The cold was unbearable, sinking deep into my bones, searing through my nerves like frozen fire. My vision darkened as a rush of memories poured into me, not just mine, but those of the forgotten year. Laughter and tears, love and betrayal, fleeting moments of joy and unspeakable horror. Faces blurred and sharpened, their voices mingling into a cacophony that threatened to overwhelm me. It was too much, too fast, like drinking from a poisoned well. The keeper's presence enveloped me, pulling me deeper into the void. And then, it was gone. I woke to silence. The room was still, the salt circle unbroken, the candle long extinguished. The book lay on the floor, its pages blank, its weight no heavier than an ordinary tome. The shadows had receded, and the oppressive air had lifted. But I was alone. I stumbled to the window, my legs weak, my hands trembling. The street below was alive with people, neighbors I hadn't seen in months, children laughing as they played in the snow. It was as if nothing had happened, as if the stolen year had never been taken. Yet as I watched, a gnawing hollowness crept through me. My memories of friends, family, of the person I once was, felt distant, faded like an old photograph left in the sun. I clutched the windowsill, trying to anchor myself, but the world beyond seemed detached, unreachable. A faint whisper brushed against my ear. "You'll forget again." I turned, but the room was empty. The keeper had kept its word. The year was returned, but the cost was steep. I existed now as a shadow, a fragment caught between moments, untethered from time. The faces of my friends and family would never look at me with recognition again. I was a ghost in my own life. Outside, the laughter grew louder, a cruel contrast to the silence inside. The keeper's warning echoed in my mind as I sank to the floor. Some things are best left forgotten.